Our most popular episode to date is our Business Model Canvas podcast. We briefly covered each of the 9 building blocks of the Business Model Canvas in that podcast. In response to many requests from our audience, we are providing 9 podcast episodes addressing each building block separately in greater depth. The Business Model Canvas, developed by Alexander Osterwalder, is a template often used to develop ideas and a monetization strategy for a startup venture. This episode is the 7th of 9 and will cover customer segments.
Our Favorite Tools for Entrepreneurs podcast addresses tools and concepts that are useful for the launch and growth of entrepreneurial ventures. Your 2 hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Brilliantly. What about you?
Having a very good day. Ryan, today we're going to be talking about another of the building blocks of the Business Model Canvas. This one will be customer segments.
Great.
Now, a customer segment, if anyone is not aware of that, it's specific groups of people or organizations that a business targets with its products and services. Typically, you look at things such as demographics, geographic locations, income levels, and other types of characteristics that will define the target market.
Yeah. I always like to name the person who very, very specifically is the best customer that you could go for. And that's really what I spend the time filling this box out with.
Yeah, that's a question I always ask. What does your typical customer look like? And until you understand that, it's very hard to build the business targeting value to that target if you don't understand who the target is.
Yep. A lot of people call it a persona. So really defining the persona.
You have to look at, is it a single segment that you can target, or do you need to break them up into different groups? For example, McDonald's, they have a segment addressing children, and then the second segment will be either teens / upwards towards adults, and they have different marketing strategies towards that. So that would be a multi-segment approach.
Or you might have different users. You might have different people that are coming on your platform, different groups that you're selling to entirely. So McDonald's is still one storefront, but the product that you're selling might fit for different people in entirely different places.
Yeah, and critical with customer segments is how are you going to communicate with them? With a single segment strategy, you're using one style of communication or one means, like one types of social media, etc. With multiple, you might have different strategies for each segment.
And this goes hand in hand with the customer relationship sphere of the business model canvas. And I think that's the reason they're right next to each other. That's how you're communicating with them. And this is specifically who you're communicating with.
When you're developing your product and service, obviously, you also need to know what segments that you're addressing.
Mm-hmm. I know we've talked a lot about this in the business model canvas, but this is one of those spheres that really should be updated regularly throughout the business. As you continue to hone down who the best customers are, changing this to make sure that the rest of your business is still orientated around that best person who, when you're first starting a business, you may not know it. You may stumble upon a different industry or a different niche that has a huge need for what you're doing, and that might not be apparent when you're first looking into it.
Very often when you're out doing business, you do stumble across a niche that it's almost like an aha factor. It's like, oh, let's redirect, let's focus almost exclusively on those because there's a higher profitability, penetration of market, et cetera.
Exactly right. And that's important to continue to factor into decisions that you're making, not just set it and forget it.
I had a former student that started a delivery company, and it was basically the strategy was, I need money. If you call me, give me a product, I'll deliver it wherever. Not a very narrow segment, but he got a phone call from a pharmacy one day asking if he could deliver the drugs to a nursing home. And that's when he hit the aha factor. So he redirected his company, and they exclusively picked up medication from pharmacies and distributed to nursing homes and expanded into 4 states with just that narrow niche.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a really great example.
But if he wasn't out there doing it, he would have never seen it.
That's exactly right. I think this happens a lot with technology products. You have to make huge assumptions for any technology company. And throughout my consultancy, I might be a little biased because this is specifically what I consult around. But oftentimes you see that one of the fringe markets that we're targeting become the biggest adopters of the platform. And you have to quickly pivot to be able to make sure you're speaking their language, pushing their messaging forward so you make them feel included in the brand.
Yeah, and you talk about the shifts in your business model, and not just for segments. I maintain a business model canvas is not embedded with the chisel into stone. It has to be flexible and ever changing. But specifically in technology, with changing being so rapid, you really have to keep your eye on that ball.
Yeah. Funny enough, a tool that I frequently use when people are struggling to define this, anyone that's ever put an ad on Facebook and how specific you can get on the person that you are targeting is a great just exercise to go through. I'm not promoting advertising on Facebook or not advertising on Facebook, but go on there and try and go through their list of the target person that you want to show that ad to and make it hypothetical. They will walk you through how many different things you can hone and whittle down to get that end customer, whether it's location, age, sex, demographic, interests, hobbies, groups that they're a part of. It's really an amazing exercise.
It can help narrow down to what is your sweet spot.
Exactly. And they give you, ballpark numbers of the audience size when you're doing that. So you can see the sweet spot of doing that. You click one too many common interests, and all of a sudden you go from having a 10,000 person audience to a 10 person audience. And although 10 could be a great place to start, it's not going to have a thriving business off of 10 customers.
If the multi-billionaires, well, those 10 might be a market, but typically 10 is not enough.
Sure. Yeah. You're never talking extremes, right?
When you're looking in terms of starting, when you're looking at what is your segment, I'm going to oversimplify it, but I like to look in two specific areas. Is it a mass market or is it a niche market? And I find very often people starting are thinking, especially when they say, I'm going to sell to everyone or everyone can buy my product, and they're thinking of a mass market. 9 times out of 10, if not 99 times out of 100, I'll start to say, let's start to look at a niche market. It's easier to identify. It's easier to address. It's easier to deliver and distribute through. It's a much more focal point because trying to sell to everyone is damn expensive.
I try and get companies to be hyper specific. Give this person a name. Bob lives in Missouri and is a plumber, and he has a household income of $100,000 a year. He has a wife and 2 children. You should feel like you know Bob by the time you're then figuring out a marketing strategy and how this relates to the rest of the business model canvas.
Yeah, definitely. So I highly encourage startups to be looking more niche plays than mass market. There are multitudes of advantages to it. Heck, that's just another podcast unto itself.
It is. Maybe we should bring a marketing expert and have them walk through the strategies they use to go through. I think that'd be a fun one.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Well, are there any other aspects of customer segments that you think we should address before we close out?
I'll just reiterate, get as specific as possible. It doesn't have to be one person. It can be multiple people, but make sure you're narrowing it down as much as you can.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Ryan.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to our Favorite Tools for Entrepreneurs podcast. As always, you can head over to ProfSpirit.com to check out more resources and courses designed for you, the entrepreneur. Please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and others to get the most up-to-date information as it is released.